Hope you're ready to learn a little bit about the central nervous system. You might see it called the CNS, central nervous system, but that is one of the systems of our body. And we are going to be looking at some vocabulary here really quickly before we read the article. There are 9 terms in this set. Some of them you might know already. Some of them you might know one way, and we'll talk about them in a different way. But take a look at this first one right here. It's memory. Memory. And one of the words I want you to think about with memory is remember, because they are definitely related. But if you look, memory is the ability to keep information and remember it over time. So right there in the definition, you have remember. So one of the big keys to the central nervous system is the brain. Like it's like almost half of the central nervous system. We'll talk about the spinal cord in a minute. But one of the brain's best jobs is to remember those things that you learn. So if you are a baby and you touch a hot stove, you're like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't do that again. So your brain and your memory often keeps you really safe. The next one, nerve cells. We talked about the cells of your body. They have certain jobs. They are the smallest part of these systems: cells, tissues, organs. These cells carry information to the body. So if you are touching that hot stove, your nerve cells at the tip of your finger will send a message to your brain really quickly, hopefully quickly, saying, hey, pull back. That's hot. You don't want to continue to have pain. So those are what the nerve cells do for your body. Signals, messages that travel through your body to control what you do. And I do have a picture of a traffic signal there. So it's kind of the same thing. If you're driving in a car, there's a signal that prompts you to stop, or it might prompt you to go. So your brain is sending your body signals all the time, just ways to keep it safe, keep it out of harm's way. The next one is actually 2 of them. So we have motor and we have motor. So the first one is definitely the science one. And when you talk about motor, think about movement. So your motor skills are how well your body moves. So you would think that like athletes have really good motor skills. You might even hear like fine motor skills. So those are very small movements, like a surgeon, a doctor who maybe operates on people should have really good fine motor skills. Obviously, working with your brain tells your hand where to move for those operations. But you might also hear motor as in like another word for the engine. So not really how we talk about motor in this class for biology, but the motor and the engine of a car, you'll hear both of those words. It's kind of like the heart. The heart of the car? Probably. Not the brain. But it's the thing that keeps pumping in a car. And if I make it a little bigger, I don't know. That's a motor. Oh yeah, the heart of the car. That's right. That's why I forgot I wrote that.
The part of the car that makes it run. The heart of the car.
Hopefully that makes sense. The next one, well, a little too big here. I do want to practice how I say this. That word that starts with a P, and it's peripheral. Peripheral. Anytime you hear peripheral, think about the edge of something. So away from the center, on the edge. You have like the central nervous system, we'll talk about in the article, which is mostly your brain and your spinal cord. But then there's the peripheral nervous system. So that's the system on the outside of the body, not so central. You also have peripheral vision. It's like what you can see out of the side of your eye. It's what we call it in English. So to be a good driver, it helps if you have a nice wide angle from which you can see. So you want to be aware of the things that are happening on the peripheral part of your brain right there, just on the side, peripheral. And the last, is it the last one? No, brain stem. So this is a very important part of the brain. And you can see where that arrow is. It's like right at the bottom of your brain. And it controls the most basic things for survival, like blinking, swallowing. It works closely with the heart to make sure your heart is beating. And then the last two, voluntary and involuntary. So voluntary means that you have control over it. You're the one making the decisions. So my hand movements right there, I'm controlling that. This is a voluntary action. Me sitting in a chair, I chose to do that. But you also have involuntary movements, and those are things you just can't control. You can't control your heartbeat. You can't control your breathing. Your brain is going to do that for you, whether you like it or not. Blinking is another one of those involuntary actions. Now, I can choose to blink, just like I did a couple times. That's the motion we call in English blinking your eyes. But if I decide that I don't want to blink, eventually my brain will say, hey, idiot, you need to blink. You need to keep your eyes wet. I was going to say moist, but a lot of people don't like that word in English. So blinking, you don't even realize you're doing it, and you do it. All right, let's look at this article here. I would like to share this instead. And you can see it says Introduction to the Nervous System. And there are some challenging vocabulary words here. The first thing we have is an illustration, which is a fancy way to say a picture. But you can see the brain is highlighted and then the spinal cord is highlighted. We talked about the backbone or the spine, and that is the bone that protects the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is an organ, very vulnerable. I think we've talked about that word. If you didn't have bones protecting it, your spinal cord could get damaged. So luckily we do have bones to protect us there. Let's start reading the first, or maybe we should. The nervous system controls what happens inside the body. The brain, the spinal cord, and nerves that extend through the body are all parts of the central nervous system. The nervous system is more than just the brain, controls the body. It's the center of thought, learning, and memory. The nervous system keeps us in touch with what happens in our bodies. Next paragraph there. I'll highlight it just in case you lost your place. The nervous system has millions of sensory receptors. Sensory, like what you can feel. These are specialized cells. They can sense a change. This change could be outside the body, like a sound, or it could be inside the body, like a change in how much sugar is in the blood. All of this information gets turned into signals. Nerves send these signals to the brain. There, the signals are brought together. The brain decides if the body's hot or cold or in pain, or it makes thoughts. It can add information to memory. Then the brain makes a decision based on input. So input is exactly what it sounds like, things going in. Like if it's too hot out, your body may involuntarily start sweating as a way to try to cool your body down. Another thing that might be involuntary is when you get sick and your brain decides, let's heat the body up. Let's give it a fever so that it can cook whatever is making this person sick. Sometimes it can go too high, which is scary. Input is where we ended, right? All right, we're here in the blue now. The nervous system responds to changes. Signals get sent back to the body. For example, the body could send a signal to a muscle, then the muscle moves. This reaction is called the motor output or motor function. So the input is what goes in, and the output is the result. There are two main groups in the nervous system. One group is the central nervous system. The other group is the peripheral nervous system. Each part has its own job. So what's the central nervous system do? The central nervous system includes the brain and spinal cord. The spinal cord is a long tube of nerves running down the spine. Both organs are very important. They are surrounded by bone for protection. The two organs connect at the base of the skull. When we talked about skull before, that's the bone that protects the brain, and the backbone or the spine is what protects the spinal cord. Back to reading. More reading. Always reading. Now remember, peripheral means kind of like on the edge. So nerves and ganglia belong to the peripheral nervous system. What the heck is ganglia? Well, it tells us right here. The ganglia are small knots of nerves. They connect nerves. There are two parts to the peripheral nervous system. One part sends information from the body to the brain. The other sends information in the opposite direction. It goes from the brain to the organs. So, two ways of information being sent. So let's go back to that hot stove. So you have nerve endings at the end of your finger. You touch something hot. There's a signal there like, whoa, that's hot. Gets sent up to your brain. I mean, this is happening within seconds. And then your brain says, whoa, we better pull back. So that's how it goes. It receives input. The output is, let's move that hand away. Make it a little bigger here. Last part right here. Within the peripheral nervous system, there is the motor division, divided into two parts. One is the voluntary nervous system, sends information to skeletal muscles. These are muscles we control, like when we choose to walk or chew. The second part is the involuntary nervous system. This controls things we do without thinking. These are things like our heartbeat or breathing. All right, so that is going to do it for today's lesson on the central nervous system, or the nervous system, central nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system. Of course, if you have any questions, let me know.